Good morning. I thought we'd sit on the porch because it's beautiful today. It's a nice day. It's not humid and it's not super hot yet. And it's time for another part of Brambly Hedge by Jill Barkland. And we're going to read The Secret Staircase. Look at them right there making their little, looks like they're up to something. It was a frosty morning and the air was crisp and cold and everything sparkled in the winter sunshine. The little mice hurried along the path, turned up their collars, and blew on their paws in an effort to keep warm. Merry midwinter, panted Dusty Dogwood, scurrying past Mr. Apple and the Toadflax children with a huge covered basket. Mr. Apple and the children were busy too, dragging great sprays of holly and trails of ivy and mistletoe towards the old oak palace. When they arrived at the gates, they heaped all the branches on the ground, and Wilfred tugged on the bell. So there they are, bringing a bunch of things with them, and there's Wilfred at the bell. Or almost at the bell. He's making his way. Mr. Woodhouse and Primrose's daughter opened the door. "Here we are," said Mr. Apple, mopping his face. "Do you want it all inside?" "Yes, please," said Lord Woodmouse. "We'll start by decorating the stairs." Eagerly the children pulled the branches over the polished palace floors and skidded their way into the great hall. "Are you two ready for tonight?" asked Lord Woodmouse. Primrose and Wilfred exchanged glances. That evening after dark, all the mice would gather around a blazing fire for the traditional midwinter celebrations, and a grand entertainment was planned, and Primrose and Wilfred had chosen to give a recitation. "Almost," said Primrose, "but we've still got to practice, and we need proper costumes." "You'd better see your mother about those," replied her father. "You can practice whenever you like." Oh, look at all that. So fancy and pretty. Bit Christmassy. Leaving Clover, Catkin, and Teasel to go back to the wood with Mr. Apple, Primrose and Wilfred took themselves off to a corner of the hall and began to go through their lines. "When the days are shortest and the nights are the coldest," began Primrose, drawing an imaginary cloak around her. "The frost is sharpest and the year is the oldest," continued Wilfred. "Look out, you two," interrupted Basil, buzzing past with some bottles. "This is hopeless," sighed Primrose. "We can't rehearse here. Let's go and ask Mama what to do." Lady Primrose was busy making caraway biscuits in the kitchen. She leaned on her rolling pin to listen to Primrose's tale of woe. "Why don't you see if there's something up in the attics for you to wear? You could practice up there too." She packed a little basket with bread and cheese and a jug of blackberry juice and shooed them gently out of the kitchen. Look at them try and practice and get interrupted by Basil. And then they're going to their mama and say, "What can we do?" And she's busy, but she gave them an idea. There were many great attic rooms at the top of the old oak palace. Lady Woodmouse used them to tidy away things that might come in useful. Baby's blankets, rolls of lace, box of buttons, stacks of books, broken toys, patchwork quilts, pudding cloths, old saucepans were all crammed together, higgly-piggly on the shelves. Primrose and Wilfred went from room to room looking for a suitable spot for the rehearsal. They ended up in the crowded storeroom at the end of the passage, but it was difficult to concentrate on practicing. There were so many things to look at. I would agree, there is a lot to look at. I'll show you the picture in just a minute. Standing on the tiptoe, Primrose reached inside the drawer of an old wooden dresser, and in it she found some bundles of leathers tied up in pink ribbon. But she couldn't read the writing, and it's rude to read other people's letters, and she put them back. As she did so, she caught sight of a small key which had slipped down at the side of the drawer. Look at all those things to look at. So much to see, and there's Primrose looking in the drawer. Wow, lots of things in storage. It would be fascinating. "Look at this, Wilfred," she cried excitedly. "Let's see. It's only an old key," said Wilfred. "Is it time for lunch?" Primrose said nothing, but she slipped the key into her pinafore pocket before setting off on their picnic on the floor. "Do you think this would make a cloak?" said Wilfred, his mouth full of bread and cheese. He had seized the end of a long green curtain and was winding himself up in it. As he turned towards Primrose, he caught sight of a small door hidden behind its folds. "Where does this go, Primrose?" he asked. "I don't know," said Primrose, scrambling over some boxes. "Does it open?" Wilfred pushed, and the door was locked, and he peeped through the keyhole and saw another flight of stairs on the other side of the door. "It's no good," he said disappointedly. "We can't get in." "If there's a keyhole, there must be a key," she said, "and I think I have it here." And she reached inside her pinafore pocket and handed the little key to Wilfred, and he tried it in the lock. It fit perfectly, and the door swung open. So see the pretty key? And there they are, finding the secret passageway. Wow, that is quite the passageway. Wait till you see it. They found themselves in a dark paneled hall at the foot of a long, winding staircase, and the stair carpet must have once been beautiful, but now was tattered and covered with dust. No one can have been up here for years and years, whispered Primrose. Shall we see what's at the top? Wilfred nodded, so up the stairs they went round and round. Primrose kept close behind Wilfred. She couldn't help feeling a little nervous. They were standing in yet another hall, and then there ahead of them was yet another door, but this time it was huge and richly carved, and they went up to it, and Wilfred gave it a push, and as the door opened, the children stared about them in amazement. So, look at this. This is their little storeroom where they were, and they found the doorway, and look at all the places it leads to. Wow, that is quite the secret passageway. They were standing in the most magnificent room, and there were columns and carvings and dark tapestries and paintings on the wall. In front of them were 2 golden chairs stood on a little platform. Everything in the room was covered with dust and smelled musty and strange. Where are we? Said Wilfred. I don't know, said Primrose. I've never been here before. They tiptoed across the floor, leaving footprints as they went. Maybe your ancestors lived here in the olden days, Primrose, said Wilfred, gazing at the imposing portrait. Let's clean it all up and have it as our house, said Primrose. We could keep it a secret and come up here and play. And as she spoke, she opened a cupboard and found it full of hats. Wilfred, look at these. These are just right for tonight. Wow, look at what they found. It does look dirty and dusty and needs cleaning, but it does also look very cool. At the end of the door led into a nursery, and there was a canopy cot near the window, and all sorts of dust-covered toys were on the shelves. And Wilfred peered inside an ancient trunk and pulled out a little suit with a high jacket and tight braided trousers. It was almost the right size for him. Neatly folded beneath it were dresses and cloaks and waistcoats and shawls, some trimmed with gold and others studded with shining stones. The children held them up one after another, and each chose an outfit for the evening and tried on. Perfect! Now we must practice. Let's finish exploring first, said Wilfred. Wow, look at all their treasures they found. How cool would that be to find a little secret place with all of those treasures, huh? They seemed to be in a whole suite of rooms. There was a dining room and a butler's pantry, a small kitchen, and several other bedrooms. The bathroom was particularly grand with tiled floor and high windows, and Wilfred rubbed a mirror clean and made faces at himself while Primrose leaned out over the side of the bath to try the taps. No water came out. When the days are the shortest and the nights are the coldest, she recited. Her voice sounded loudly and echoey, and Wilfred joined in, and they went through their lines again and again till they were word perfect. Outside, the red sun was sinking low in the frosty air, and the bathroom was filled with shadows. It's getting late, Primrose. If we don't hurry, we'll miss the log. They picked up their clothes and scampered over the dusty floors to the door. Look at that. What a grand bathroom indeed. Down the stairs they round and round, down and down, until they found themselves in the storeroom, and they locked the door with a little key and replaced it in the drawer. And when they crept along the corridors to Primrose's room, taking care to keep out of sight. Goodness, look at how big that palace tree is with all the different rooms. You'd about need a map to know where you were. Primrose opened her window, and they could just hear the caroling of the mice as the midwinter log was pulled along the hedge. There was no time to change, so they threw on the cloaks to hide their costumes and ran to join the crowd at the palace gates. Mr. Apple and Dusty Dogwort headed the procession, lanterns held high. Roast the chestnuts, heat the wine, pass the cups along the line. Gather round, the log burns bright. It's warm and toasty inside tonight, they sang as the log came into view. Teasel, Clover, and Catkin were perched on the huge branch as it was dragged up to the palace gates. Primrose and Wilfred scrambled up behind. So there they are, hurrying to catch up. And there's everybody out in the night to celebrate the log. The mice pulled the log carefully over the threshold, and Basil threw some bramble wine into the bark. Merry Midwinter, he called, and at last the log was there. The midwinter celebrations could begin. A fire had been laid ready in the hearth of the great hall, and the log was rolled into it, and everyone was handed a cup of steaming punch. Old Mrs. Eyebright was to light the fire, and she held up a burning taper. To summer, she announced, and Mr. Apple stooped to help her thrust the taper into the fire. To summer, echoed the mice. The bright flames licked the mossy bark, and soon the log was ablaze, and the mice helped themselves to supper, which was spread on a table near the fire, and Basil refilled their cups. Why don't you take off your cloaks, dear, said Lady Woodmouse. It's very hot here by the fire. Not just yet, Mamma, said Primrose. I'm still a bit chilly. So there's their cups, and there they are by the fire. What a celebration, huh? When they had eaten all they could, they drew up their chairs up around the hearth, and the entertainment began. Mr. Apple made huge shadows on the wall by standing in front of the fire, and he made the shape of a weasel with a mean little eye and a snake head, and a fox, and with the aid of a curtain and a bat. And the little mice squealed and laughed, and next Basil danced a jig on his fiddle, and Dusty did some conjuring tricks. And when they had tried to pass the crab apple around the circle, holding it under their chins, after Lord Woodmouse told stirring tales of olden times, Primrose and Wilfred nudged each other. Everyone did a turn, and until at last Lord Woodmouse and now Primrose, what have you got for us? And the children jumped up and took their places in front of the fire, and drawing their cloaks closely around, they began. Midwinter, when the days are shortest and the nights are coldest, the frost is sharpest and the year is the oldest, the sun is the weakest, the wind is the hardest, the snow is the deepest, the skies are the darkest, then polish your whiskers, tidy your nest, dressed in your finest, richest, and best. So there they are with their little entertainment, and there they are with their cloaks. What surprises do they have? For winter has brought you the worst it can bring, and now it will give you the promise of spring. Primrose and Wilfred threw off their cloaks and donned their hats with a flourish, and the audience gasped to see such beautiful clothes which sparkled in the firelight, and they clapped and cheered louder than ever, and the applause went on for so long that Lord Woodmouse has to ask them to do it all over again. Wow, look at them. How fancy are they? And all the people seeing them? So exciting. At last, Primrose and Wilfred went back to their seats. That was wonderful, whispered Lady Woodmouse, hugging her. Wherever did you find those beautiful clothes? Primrose glanced quickly at Wilfred. In the attic, she mumbled, hoping that her mother would not ask more awkward questions. Luckily, at the moment, Basil started to tell one last story, and everyone settled down to listen. Primrose and Wilfred gazed at the fire and thought of the lovely games they could play in their house at the top of the secret staircase. Soon their heads began to nod, and in no time at all, they were both fast asleep. And there they are, asleep on their mama's laps. Isn't that cool? I would love a secret passageway into a really fun place like that. How cool would that be? Well, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good day today, and I hope you enjoyed the story, and we'll come back for more.